Hey, this is C&D Chow. I'm Chris. This is MMA for you. I'm going to be doing my UFC Fight Night 34 post-fight analysis. Overall, it wasn't. There were some fights that were stinkers. Wee versus Galera, Kakuno versus Mulhern wasn't that great either. But other fights are actually pretty good. Average to very good. As far as bonuses go, Max Holloway got knockout of the night. Russell Doan got submission of the night. And Safadine and Lim got fight of the night honors. My picks, I got 8 out of 10. The ones that I missed were Royston Yee versus David Galera. And Keiichi Kunimoto versus Luis Dutra. Some talking points about this would be the UFC Fight Pass. I didn't watch this live. It was like in 3 in the morning for me, or 6 in the morning for the main card. I actually watched it with some friends at night with the laptop connected to TV, so I just watched it on TV. The picture is actually really good. I was actually impressed with that. Didn't have too much like buffering or stopping issues, And from what I read about the UFC Fight Pass, once again, it looks like I'm shilling the pass, but for like MMA fans, it doesn't have the full library, but it does have some pretty good fights on there and whatnot, and events, and you can actually replay this show whenever you want, so that was pretty cool. That's what me and my friends did. Another note about this card was the refereeing. There's some things that are a bit questionable, but otherwise, it wasn't that bad of a card. I think it went to expectation pretty much. Okay, let's get started. We got Tarek Safadine beating Hyung-Gyu Lim by unanimous decision. The story of this fight really was the leg kicks from Safadine. But there's another story to the fight that I'm noticing from a lot of people. A lot of people felt that Safadine's fight IQ wasn't very good in the later rounds. Like, he stopped leg kicking. He took the fight to the ground after dropping Lim. Instead of standing, he kept the fight. He went to the ground with Lim. I will say this. I personally am gonna give Safadine a pass. I'm a big fan of his, so maybe I'm a bit biased. But from watching the fight, I read the results too, and I read people saying that. So and then I watched the fight. I gotta say, during and after the 4th round, Safadine looked pretty fatigued in my opinion. And there's a contingent of fans that feel that he was indeed fatigued. I remember he dropped him with the flying knee, and then he was on top. I think he even had like mount or some dominant positions, and he even had the ride position, and he threw like 4 punches. He looked a bit tired at the 4th, and you got to consider the guy came off a 1-year layoff, and he's fighting a really tough guy in Hyung-Gyu Lim. Kind of reminds me of the Faber fight. There was some small contingent of fans that were talking about having the fight stopped around like the 4th, especially since he kept getting dropped after every leg kick. The way the fight played out, I guess it's not the worst thing. I would have been fine either way, had the fight been stopped or the way it is, The guy who who fought better ended up winning. And that makes him for some interesting matchups at welterweight, especially with George St. Pierre gone, because Safadine should most likely than not get a top 10 opponent. Matt Brown or Jake Ellenberger would be my choice for him. His striking's still really technical. His ground is alright. It's serviceable, but it's not finishing. I think that's the thing. He can get the fight to the ground. He doesn't do enough from top position, though. He doesn't go for submissions or much ground and pound. Defensively, though, his takedown defense, Saffiedin's takedown defense is really good. And his ability to get back to his feet when he's taken down is very strong as well. I think there's a couple concerning things with Saffiedin moving forward. He doesn't have the best killer instinct. You can see that with his lack of finishes in his last couple fights. But he is a very good fighter. With Lim, tough guy, still really young, huge for the weight class. Just more lower to mid-tier guys of the division. More mid. I mean, he can beat the Marcelo Gomez's and the Pascal Krauses of the world now. He can beat like those lower guys. Maybe just more like mid-level guys. I'm trying to think in welterweight who's like solid mid. Like an Ebersol. Yeah, there you go. Like an Ebersol. It's like a solid mid. Maybe someone who tests his wrestling like a Jason High or something like that. That'd be actually a pretty tough fight for Lim. John Howard. Ooh, that'd be a good one. John Howard versus Hungi Lim would actually be pretty good as well. Next fight after that, Tatsuya Kawajiri beats Sean Soriano by technical submission as a rear naked choke in the second round. Good one for Kawajiri. The guy's 35. He had a pretty rough start against Soriano, who looks to be a pretty good prospect. Small holes in his game, but otherwise his stand-up solid. Takedown defense isn't too bad. It's just Kawajiri is just all over him and has way more experience playing that game. Soriano does have a problem with giving up his back when he's taken down, but otherwise, he looks like a solid prospect. UFC ready. Should probably fight more lower to mid-tier guys at the division. Kawajiri was saying like it was the nerves. It was his first fight in the UFC. He had a pretty cool post-fight interview as well, thanking a lot of people, calling for a taller shot or a top 10 guy. His game is relentless wrestling and very strong ground and pound. You can probably get that on a good amount. He can probably beat a good amount of fighters, but he got clipped. I think he got kneed at one point, and he took some elbows, Travis Brown does his opponents as well. But otherwise, I think Kawajiri should get a pretty good step up in competition. I think the winner of Jeremy Stevens versus Darren Elkins, Hackman Diaz, or Nick Lentz would be good next opponents. At his age, if he's gonna get to the top of the division, he's really experienced. At this point, there's not too much point in him fighting mid or lower tier guys. He's fought enough of those guys and beating them. He's only lost like top guys like Melendez, Aoki, and Alvarez. And at featherweight, he looks pretty good in weight class. So I'd give him guys like that. And what's interesting about guys like Elkins, Diaz, and Lentz is they're grinders themselves. So it's like you're trying to win the battle of who's like the best grinder. Next fight after that doesn't really tell me much about the winner here. Is Keiichi Kunimoto beat Luis Dutra by disqualification in the first round as illegal elbows. That was the right call, though, for sure. Dutra was doing 12-6 elbows to the very sensitive part of the back of the head, where like the spine meets the head. It was like that area, dangerous area. A lot of people were saying that Kunimoto was probably milking it. I don't know. Could have been it. It kind of seemed like it to me personally. Otherwise, not great fight IQ for Dutra, and it's very questionable whether he gets another fight in the UFC. This fight told me nothing about Kunimoto. I don't know. There's no fight footage of him either, so I don't know if he's a good fighter, a bad fighter, or whatnot. He should just get more lower to mid-tier guys of his division. If he can get down, was this at 135? If he can get down to 125, or it might be pretty helpful for him. Next fight, I thought Kang Hyo Kang beat Shunichi Shimizu by arm triangle in the third round. There was the 2-point deduction for Kang for doing 12-6 elbows. It was while he was like triangling his opponent and he was hitting proper elbows at first, but they were moving so much, and when he was on top, then he was hitting like 12-6. I always hated the 12-6 rule. This is different with the Dutra fight because Dutra is hitting the back of the head, which I am fine with. That legitimately is a safety issue. There's some people that tell me about 12-6. Well, it's concentrated at one spot. If it hits the eye or like the nose, you can smash it in and whatnot. From what I heard that like the Muay Thai elbow like this, you can get a lot of torque from that, from like the shoulder, and I'm actually getting the hip in there. It is actually, from what I heard, it's actually more damaging than a 12-6 elbow. Because you can get more force of blow onto your opponent, whereas this is more arm. That's what I heard, and I think there's some truth to that. But if you do these ones, there's more angle. If you want to go with the eye thing, like, you can damage a guy's eye, John Jones versus Brandon Vera from the guard. What type of elbows was John Jones using? Not 12-6. He still busted the dude's eye. So, once again, I would need some sort of like, I guess, empirical evidence to show that 12-6 indeed are more dangerous than the elbows normally used. And like I said, if you want to use evidence that one can really bust up an eye or something, we have evidence that the normal elbow that you see that fighters implement have damaged eyes before. So I would like to see a more compelling argument than this one, 12-6 are more concentrated at one point and therefore are more damaging. Tell that to Brandon Vera when he got his eye busted by non-12-6 elbows against John Jones. So, if you're going to cause the same type of damage but one's legal and one isn't, I just don't see why one is illegal then. Because if both are capable of performing the same type of damage. That's my argument there. Why? And from what Rogan said, 12-6 elbows are outlawed because of a karate demonstration where a guy used a 12-6 elbow to break a block of ice. It's the origin of this strike, the legality of the strike is a bit contentious. With that said, this is a good one for Kang. He showed, and what's cool about this fight, Shimizu is primarily ground fighter, but Kang was a much bigger guy. Shimizu should probably cut to 120. I think this was actually the fight. I may have been wrong about Kunimoto. I think this was the fight that showed that Shimizu, that one of the guys should have cut down a weight class. Because I know Shimizu is significantly smaller than Kang. And Kang's a big 135er. He's always had a really good ground game, though. He's good in the scramble, good at getting dominant positions. Really good off his back, too. I think he should have just kept the leg triangle chokes in the beginning. But yeah, otherwise, good one for Kang. Arguably he beat Caceres. Arguably he beat Camus. He's still a pretty good prospect. Striking wise, he needs some work, especially More defensively. Offensively, he's not too bad, but defensively, he needs a lot of work. His ground game, pretty strong, though. His scrambling game is great, and his transition game is great as well. Shimizu, if he can cut down to 125, maybe he can do something there. I don't know. He's primarily a ground guy. And we've seen in the UFC some of the better ground guys not do very well at 125. I believe it's like, who's here? De Silva, or Formiga, and some other guys that are primary ground guys. Oh, Darren Uyenoyama didn't look very good against Alp Oskalik, Guys that are just primary ground guys tend to not do very well. And I mean by ground, just like BJJ guys. If you have strong wrestling to complement it, it'd be one thing, but I don't know if Shimizu even has strong wrestling to complement his ground game. Those type of specialists don't tend to do well, especially at flyweight and the lower weight classes. I think a lot of guys are pretty squirrely and can scramble pretty well in the lower weight classes and whatnot. But yeah, good one for Kang. I think he's a pretty good prospect. I like he actually has some, I was saying that thing about the ground game, but I think Kang actually does have some pretty decent wrestling. He's actually been able to take down most of his opposition so far. Next fight after that, Max Holloway beat Will Chope by TKO in the second round. Good one for Holloway. It was kind of what I expected, and he did aim for the body. He's always had good body striking. Almost blew his wad, pretty much. But he was pretty relentless on his attack against Chope. For a guy who's so tall and Chope, he still has some technical deficiencies, especially in the stand-up. Doesn't use a jab very well. Looks off balance at times, I know his strength is on the ground. He's the world's tallest featherweight. If he can, like Stefan Struve, if he can use his reach, he can be a force. Otherwise, some tall guys just don't know how to use it right. Both are still pretty good prospects. I mean, Max Holloway's just fought more in the UFC, has the better striking. But Chope, not the worst prospect out there. He's still young himself. I think he's on 23, 24. Holloway's on 22 or something like that. So they're still both pretty young in their careers. Holloway, though, he's only lost to good guys, McGregor, Bermudez, and Poirier. I think he's just got more mid-level guys, There's some guys he can beat, some guys that he can't. He still just needs to develop. With Will Chope, just more lower-level guys. And actually, pretty much for most of these guys, I'm just going to say lower to mid-tier guys. Next fight after that, not a great fight, as Katsunori Kikuno beat Quinn Mulhern by unanimous decision. Mulhern did officially retire from mixed martial arts. Stated it on his Facebook, sent a letter to the fans. His game plan really consisted of pulling guard and not doing much once he was down there. He wasn't chaining submissions and sweeps or anything. It's one thing to pull guard, cool. And he is a ground guy, but he's really good in the scramble. Didn't really force the scramble. Didn't do much, It just wasn't the best game plan for him, Kikuno didn't really get to show the crescent kicks and whatnot. A lot of the fight was taking place while he was on top. He didn't do much from top. But with Kikuno, I would say give him more lower to mid-tier guys. I would like to see more stand-up fighters, though, in Kikuno's future as well. If he can get to 145, that would also help him as well. 155 is pretty much a Shark Tank. Quinn Mulhern, granted, he dropped from welterweight, but there's a lot of big guys in weight class. Tall guys, Bobby Green, Pat Healy, James Krause, a a lot of big guys. Habib Nurmagomedov, Gleison Tibau, Abel Trujillo. They're all huge for the weight class. I think Akuno, if he can, should probably try cutting to 145. Next fight at that, Royston Yi beat David Galera by unanimous decision. I mean, we got the win, but both, quite honestly, are not UFC ready. Galera, I mean, I was looking forward to his debut on Filipino American. You know, he's the first Filipino national, from what I heard, to find the UFC. And I mean, this guy, body kick, get taken down, no sense of urgency, get back to his feet. Kind of went for like the same move. He's trying to go for like the same hip sweep a lot of times. It's like he only had like one go-to or two go-to moves. I was very disappointed in Galera, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, granted, it was his first fight in the UFC. He doesn't have a lot of experience. So it's not like it should have been unexpected. I mean, he's still really green. So in that sense, I shouldn't be too hard for him. I guess him being Filipino, I mean, I really wanted to see him win. So it is, I guess in that sense, it was a bit more personal. Royston Yi, we didn't show much. I mean, good takedowns, good top control, I guess. I don't think it's enough in the UFC. I mean, maybe he can implement that against other guys at 135. Kind of doubt it. Let's just see him fight more lower to mid-tier guys of the division, though, I guess there is another story here, then, with this UFC Fight Night, in that you got guys like some of these Japanese fighters and whatnot, and I guess that it goes to show that the UFC is using these international cards as something of their own developmental league, in a sense. All these guys are unknown guys. Some of them are prospects, and they're fighting other lower to mid-tier guys, lower level guys. So, in a sense, it's almost like, I doubt Royston Yi is going to get that big of a step up in competition. Maybe he's just going to get some dude from the Ultimate Fighter China. Just some lower tier guy or something like that. But it kind of goes to show me that, they're kind of making like a developmental league, in a sense, for these international fighters, in a sense, using these Fight Pass cards. Isn't the worst strategy, I mean, maybe these guys can cut their teeth in the regional side, or maybe the UFC can just pick up these guys when they're still young, still fresh prospects, and since they have so many guys on the roster now, maybe you can feed some of these guys you can get some lower tier guys, some lower tier prospects, other lower tier fighters, It seems like that's what they're doing. They got their first Singapore national fighter. Hey, if this guy turns out to be pretty decent, they got a new guy they can market, that they can promote and market to a new international market. So, hey, there's the trade-off right there. Could be beneficial for the UFC in the future. Not the worst idea. I've always wanted the UFC to have something of a farm league. They use regional promotions as their own farm league. You see guys coming from Legacy. A lot of these guys came from like PXC and other organizations. But, maybe it's time that the UFC has their own farm league. This, in a sense, kind of felt like a farm league, with a lot of prospects fighting each other, UFC newbies fighting each other, lower tier guys fighting lower tier guys, and whatnot. Next fight at that, Marbek Taisumov beat Taehoon Bang by unanimous decision. Bang didn't really show much. Strong chin, but otherwise, it's a lot of Taisumov here. He's actually a pretty good prospect. He has a lot of fights under his belt. He's a good wrestler. Not the, pretty good stand-up as well. He's a solid fighter. I just think he's fighting more mid-level guys in the UFC. There isn't really much to say about this fight. Bang didn't really show me much. If they keep him, it's more lower tier fighters in the UFC. Next fight after that, Dustin Kimura beat John De Los Reyes by armbar in the first round. De Los Reyes and John Tuck are two fighters out of Guam. I guess that's a place that is producing some pretty decent fighters. De Los Reyes, he managed to drop Kimura, but he made the mistake of going into the ground with a very strong ground fighter in Dustin Kimura. That was a problem with Chico Camus, actually. He kept going to the ground with Kimura, even though he had superior stand-up, and Chico Camus ended up losing. So, Kimura's pretty good prospect. The Hawaiians went 3-0. Holloway, Kimura, and Doan. All finishes as well. So, good for them. And they're all young fighters. They're not even like 24, I think they're like, what, no older than, what, 24, 25, 26, something like that. All young. Show good ground game and decent stand-up. Kimura needs to work on his stand-up, but his ground game is really strong. Speaking of ground games, Dustin Kimura versus Kyung Hyo Kang wouldn't be the worst fight to make after this. De Los Reyes, if they keep him, just more lower tier fighters of the division. And finally, Russell Doan beat Leandro Issa by triangle choke in the second round. Interesting because Issa is primarily a ground fighter, and Doan won by triangle choke, got submission of the night. Good win for him, I believe he quit his job from what I read, as a carpenter to be a full-time fighter after this. That's what he needs to do. He recognizes that, and I'm curious to see where he goes from here. Just more lower to mid-tier guys for both of these fighters. That's pretty much it for my post-fight analysis for UFC Fight Night 34. If you have any comments, just leave them below. That's it for MMA for you. Thank you guys very much.